Hello Internet, Taliesin here. Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reset, Taliesin and Evitel's Wondrous Wisdomshow. In a week where Season 2 of The War Within is in full swing. The race to World First is over, and there's one question on everyone's lips. How many market research do I need to get the cool-ass Neo coat so I can be Neo, though? And what class makes the best Neo? Like a monk, obviously, but not a Brewmaster monk, though, because the whole beer keg thing is way too goofy for Neo. Neo isn't goofy, he's edgy. There's none more edgy, so actually, obviously, your Neo has to be a demon hunter. But also, you need 8,400 market research. Enjoy the Dark Fuse farm spot by the big submarine, fam. And then, of course, there's the other question on everyone's lips. Is World of Warcraft too easy now? And honestly, I think in the wake of the Liberation of Undermine race and Season 2, this is a fair question to ask that we are going to be talking about in depth. But first, let's have a rundown of all the week's other news with Evitel.
It's time for Evie's News Rundown. Let's run down. Huge class changes. Huge trinket tuning. As usual, now that the race to World First is over, Blizzard can finally get about fixing all the borked balancing issues that 11.1 launched with, and there are some big winners and losers in this round of tuning, like Mistweavers. Your time has come. Your bell has tolled. Blizz has noticed all that damage you've been doing, and you never want to be noticed by Blizz when you're in a good place, so you get hit by the nerf bat. Yeah, we have a graphic. And just your damage, not healing. Discipline priests, big healing nerfs through atonement. Holy priests, you've been buffed so much that you might actually do some healing now, but you still have to play holy, sorry. Balance druids get a damage buff. Elemental shaman get like a literal 500% damage buff to primordial wave, which is a bit like putting a bow tie on a poop before you flush it, but it's nice that they tried, you know? Augmentation got a small buff to its direct damage, which is like a party of 20 leaving a $5 tip after their meal. And Vengeance Demon Hunter, the undisputed more meta than meta Mythic Plus pick right now, well, you've had it too easy for too long now, fam. Be prepared for a 30% nerf to Demon Spike's parry chance with deflecting spikes. Whoa there, Blizz. Holy shit, you went too far this time. Also, buffs across the board for pretty much every direct damage trinket in Season 2, with some of the underperforming ones buffed by up to 20%. This probably isn't going to change any metas at the top end. It's just the way of WoW that a good stat increase trinket is almost always going to outperform something that does like an explosion of fire damage. So Eye of Kazan can rest easy in its comfy bed in the S-tier penthouse for now, but it's certainly going to help a lot of players who are making do with their not quite biz trinks feel a bit better about their lot. As always, for a more detailed breakdown of everything you need to know about these changes and how they're going to totally dick up your raid night, we are linking the relevant Wowhead articles below for you to peruse at your leisure. The Heavenly Regalia pack is here. Both of these variants were data mined a while ago now, and we've been playing the very fun game of will this awesome, unique, but not very thematically War Within set be a trading post or shop item? We've been kind of overloaded with shop items recently, with one new bundle every 1 or 2 weeks, so obviously it's a shop item. Okay, fine, whatever. I think there is maybe a conversation to be had about the relentlessness of shop releases in 2025 for sure, especially with player housing on the horizon, but this is my breezy rundown segment and not Tally's boring discussing things segment, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to point out something that I know a lot of you may have missed. You get both the Radiant, sun-themed, and Shining, moon-centric sets, but you also have both sun and moon style shoulders in both silver and golden colorways, which is pretty cool. Why not one on each shoulder? Good news for everyone who was worried they would have to spend precious tendies on these. Bad news for anyone who doesn't have gold and needs to spend the real life dollary dues. Don't forget that there's probably still time to take part in the Trial of Style, which is probably, on now as you watch this video, which this time out has new rewards to buy, mostly in cool rugged sepia, like the awesome Prowler's headgear and shoulder cape, as well as all those new war skirts that everyone likes. Added bonus, you can also hang around after the event for a chance of catching the dialogue between the event hosts and mysterious ethereal Shadreen, who also hangs out in an unreachable spot in Telogris Rift. This dialogue has always been in Trial of Styles since its introduction, but most people don't know it's there, and feels like it might be getting pretty relevant is all. Just saying, maybe check it out, that's all. Huge exploit punishment. Blizz have stripped the Tempered Hero achievement gained from achieving a 3K Mythic Plus rating from nearly 9,000 players for cheating. In China. It's a Chinese thing. Sorry, I probably should have led with that and published the names of all 8,992 players in the blue post, which is kind of baller or kind of scary. Most importantly, it appears that Chinese players can have names made up of multiple words. Snow Knight, Wrong Luck, The Last Dragon, Drive Away Sorrow. Look, straight up, I want to be able to call myself Drive Away Sorrow, and now we have player housing. This is the WoW change I will be fighting for above everything else. Well, apart from hair showing under hats, obviously. So these guys, don't trust these guys, but they do have cool names. As the Chinese GMs say when they are banning 9,000 people, I wish you a happy game.
And so to our main story today, how World of Warcraft is too easy now and basically only for children and girls. The subject of difficulty in WoW has always been a hot topic from day one. Don't forget that at launch, the game was criticised by players of other MMOs for being the scrub, normie version of the genre, by introducing such snowflake millennial crybaby participation trophy cheat code nonsense as not losing all of your gear when you died. And within the game, there has always been a divide, real or imagined, between the more hardcore player base and what are usually termed casuals. Although, of course, in this case, casual can mean anything up to someone who has literally played tens of thousands of hours of the game, like 30 hours a week for the past 20 years, but just doesn't care about raiding. Whether it be by the introduction of flying or group finder or queuing instances or LFR, welfare epics, remember the people that were upset about that? The game's gradual streamlining and polish and increased user friendliness over the years has often been seen as something that has robbed WoW of its magic to a certain degree. And to a certain degree, that's probably true. I think that perceived divide has been highlighted again this week though, and maybe over the last couple of expansions if we're honest, in the way that most of us agree the game has become noticeably easier of late, with the race to world first and the killing of Mythic Chrome King Gallywix by Liquid, a boss that was seen as very disappointing to much of the community in how quick and easy it was, to the extent that it appears to have sparked genuine anger in parts of the high-level community.
Incompetence, embarrassing, complete calamity. I'm literally furious with what they did during that raid. Ultimately, embarrassing is the word I will go with. Absolutely embarrassing for Blizzard.
So, what went wrong? And how is this representative of a broader trend? Well, basically, Gallywix was too easy in the race to world first. Liquid took him down in 100 pulls, Echo in less than 60 pulls for world second, and that is seen as underwhelming at best and
embarrassing. They did not deliver. This is possibly one of the worst designed raids of all time. It should never played out this way. There is no justifiable reason.
At worst, if you follow the race to world first, then it's disappointing to see the final boss of a shiny new raid get deleted so quickly, especially when he's a character so lore important as Gallywix, and especially because there was no real climax to the fight itself. Whereas final raid bosses will often have a hectic final phase with new things to deal with, Gally just kind of cycled through the same mechanics he'd been using all fight until he died, which doesn't make it feel like an event. You want a bit of excitement, you want at least two teams head to head pushing each other every inch of the way, and you need a final boss worthy of fulfilling that promise. I totally agree with this sentiment, by the way. I was personally disappointed to see Gallywix die so quickly, but more importantly, so undramatically and unclimactically. That's a shame. It's a shame for me as a viewer, and it's a shame for me as someone who wants the game to do well, because a lot of people who don't play WoW right now and might be tempted back, the thing they now know about the current expansion is that people are disappointed in the new raid.
What is happening here? It's ridiculous. That's so stupid. It's so stupid. That's nonsense. That's so ridiculous.
I want to make it clear here, I'm not showing these clips to criticize Preach for his opinion, or to prove him wrong, or even disagree with him, just to illustrate the feeling in the community. I will not hear a bad word said about Preach, okay? Don't even think about it. It's not even that the whole raid was too easy either. It is mostly just the Gallywix fight. To put it into context, the last time a raid's final boss took as few pulls to kill as Gallywix was the Emerald Nightmare, the very underwhelming first raid of Legion 8.5 years ago. There have been 21 raids in the last 11 years. Only Liberation of Undermine and 3 others had a final boss that was killed in less pulls than the boss before it. It's a shame that's how it turned out this time, and it's a little bit annoying that Undermine, which is such a great zone and patch and fun and unique raid experience, might be remembered in this disappointing way, because it deserves better. Now, of course, what Liquid and Echo's experience is like when they kill these bosses is nothing like what basically any other player's experience will be. The second the race is over, we get big rounds of class tuning and also boss tuning, which are mostly nerfs of one kind or another. And it's funny to see how those world first streams do filter into player consciousness. My guild only just killed Heroic Mugsy last night, and I think there was a genuine surprise among many of our players when Gallywix didn't basically just fall over after a few pulls, because he is an easy boss. After all, the community knows he is an easy boss. And yeah, no, he absolutely flattened us for half an hour before raid night was finished, and it was quite funny. But it is definitely true that this raid and boss is only one reason that the game feels easier right now. Because I don't think I'm being controversial when I say it definitely does. Immortalis, Argent Dawn, EU are flying through this raid. You probably noticed we didn't have a race to world first heroic for guilds with names a bit like Immortalis segment at the beginning of this episode, and the reason for that is because the race is pretty much over. Bit like Immortalis were 5% off killing Gally last night as we made our first pull. And okay, so they didn't actually kill him, and technically we are currently in a head-to-head race for first place, which is actually very exciting. But bear in mind, this segment, this race that we completely made up because we thought it was funny, used to take around 5 or 6 weeks at least to finish. This isn't getting past week 3. Mythic Plus is a lot easier in Season 2 than it was in Season 1. It feels a lot more like those Dragonflight seasons, which themselves were noticeably easier than what came before. And to be clear, I don't even know if the content is actually easier or if it's just been made easier by how much more friendly to players the game is now. Warbans have been huge. It's never been easier to level up and gear an ult, but also a main. Delves giving heroic loot is huge. The Vault giving tier pieces on every track is huge. The Catalyst is huge. I have not had a single piece of gear drop for me in the Liberation of Undermine guild runs, but I have 4 set from 1 piece of tier I got in my vault and 3 Catalyst charges that I've received this season. You might only have 2, but that's because you haven't done Keystone Master. It's very useful. I have never had 4 set in week 3 of a raid before. I usually get it just in time to kill the final boss, which I guess I did this season again, actually, but like I say, that usually takes at least twice as long. Crafting is huge. I was able to craft myself a top-level staff in week 2 because I'd run some +7 keys for the top-level crests. And this much faster pace of gearing undoubtedly is the main driver in how much easier the game is feeling at the moment, I think, even if it isn't the only reason. But here's an important question. Is that bad? Or is that actually really good, actually? Actually, that's really good, actually. So here's the thing. We might be disappointed about how quickly Gallywix died, but something I think is absolutely true, the player base in general prefers the game when it's easier. The final boss may have been underwhelming to watch, but the raid itself lasted about the amount of time players like it to last. It's generally seen as bad when the race to World First goes into a third week. If it had in this case, Echo literally had nowhere to stay because they only booked their accommodation in Germany for a fortnight. They might have been surprised by how fast the single boss Gallywix died, but the overall length of the race was objectively almost exactly what they had planned for. Season 3 in Dragonflight is generally considered to be the best Mythic Plus season of all time, and I don't disagree with that. Everyone loved that season, but it was also probably the easiest season in Mythic Plus history too. The only season I ever got 3K rating with. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't hear anyone saying there should be less gear in the vault. I don't hear anyone complaining that war bands make gear and rep and currencies too easy to share. I know that I'm not alone in thinking that gameplay and philosophy-wise, WoW is actually in the best spot it has been in the modern age. So from Warlords onwards, honestly, I think maybe it's in the best spot ever. And you might disagree with that, but the point is, it is not a controversial thing to say. People like getting their gear quicker. And I think it still feels good overall because players are still having to work for their gear. They are still having to raid. They are still having to run dungeons, but there's way more options with the vault and delves and crafting too. And that's important. People aren't getting something for nothing. They just have way more opportunities per week to work and earn their gear. And I think that's great. Yay for lots of ways to get gear. Yay for the vault. Yay for the catalyst. Yay for warbands, holy shit. Yay for me having tier sets sooner than ever. Yay for me having Keystone Hero and my portals sooner than ever. Yay for the game respecting our time more than ever. This is all very, very good. But here's the thing. It's actually also bad, actually. Actually, it's bad, actually. So I love that more of the game is now open to me as a player, a pretty bad player, because the game is giving me more opportunities to get the gear I need to push into that higher content. But there are downsides to that too. For me, personally, heroic raiding is not a fun difficulty level to take part in anymore. Ever since I've been a member, my guild has seen heroic raid as our main content and ahead of the curve as our main objective. And that's great when it takes us a couple of months to complete. That's great when nearly every boss or two is at least a raid night by itself. But currently, I find raid very unsatisfying. I honestly can't tell you what most of the main mechanics of any boss before the conveyor belt guy even are in Undermine, because we one or two shot everything, and that's not really fun, actually. We are going to have Curve next week, probably, the week after at the latest. And then my favorite thing about WoW, progressing raid content with some of my favorite people on Earth, is over. And we won't get that again as a friendship group until next raid. And it feels like as the raids get easier, we are getting less and less of that time together. And that is bad for me personally. I know that many of you will say, well, just go into Mythic, and we'll try, but our raid doesn't really have a reliable fixed number. We're always going to be under 20 players or over, and we don't really want to be benching people. We want to hang out. What I'm saying is there is nothing now in the game that fills the space, that serves the purpose that heroic raid used to do up until very recently. And if that's a problem for us, it is going to be a problem for lots of other people too. At the same time, I don't want to make gear harder to get again. I love how it is right now. It just feels like at the mid-level, the game hasn't quite caught up to the new gear normal yet. Getting the gear so soon feels great, but it's okay to make the content harder as a result, in my opinion. But even with the gear aside, I think the fights are getting easier anyway. There is, for example, a complete lack of mechanics in this raid where one person dicking up can wipe the entire raid. The kind of thing that we used to have loads of, and I know everyone hated those mechanics, but I don't know, man, progression felt better when we had them, in my opinion. Like, it's hard to imagine a fight that needs the kind of communication and coordination that Mecha Talk in Dazara Lore did. It's hard to imagine heroic Mecha Talk existing in a heroic War Within raid. So it's not just that we're gearing quicker, it is is that some of the fights at this level are asking less of us too. Maybe that balance can be tweaked a bit when it comes to fight complexity. I know that probably won't be a popular thing to say, so I genuinely love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Have you noticed that the game is becoming easier? What's the reason for that in your opinion? Is it a bad thing? This is going to rely so much on like personal vibes. It's almost impossible, I think, for each certain type of player to see past their own experience. What a world first raider considers to be wrong with difficulty might be completely different from what a standard cutting edge raider sees as the issue, which might be completely different to what an ahead of the curve guild thinks is wrong, which might be completely different from what the others, like 60% of the entire player base, think is wrong. So I legitimately look forward to hearing your opinion on this, and thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all our work happen. And patrons, seriously, oh thank you, because without you, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Artemirs. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.